Hey everyone, it's Caitlin and welcome to another video. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make low waste, essentially free vegetable broth. I use vegetable broth in a lot of my recipes because it can add a ton of flavor, especially in soups, but I also use it sometimes to saute vegetables if I choose not to use oil when I'm cooking. But regardless, I feel like vegetable broth is a staple in many recipes. But the thing is, it can kind of get expensive and it's also very wasteful. So most vegetable broth comes in like those plastic Tetra packs or cartons that you see in the grocery store, as well as chicken stock, other meat-based stocks as well, obviously. But the thing about those is that they're kind of expensive, like I just said. And then also that carton, it's really hard to recycle. You have to make sure it's really cleaned, and still at the end of the day, not all the materials from that carton are going to be recycled. So if you're looking for a more low waste alternative, I suggest making your own. It's actually really easy and you already have everything you need in your kitchen because all you're going to do is save up your leftover vegetable scraps over time, put them in a freezer bag, and then when you're ready, cook them for a little bit with water and voila, you have vegetable broth. I've shown this process a few times on my Instagram stories, but you guys are always asking for a blog post / a tutorial. So I made a blog post, it's going to be linked below, but without further ado, let's just get right into it. So like I said, you get a bag, you fill it with veggie scraps. So I like to use these reusable avocado, I think these are blue avocado bags. Basically just any reusable size Ziploc bag. You can also use a freezer bag and just reuse the same one over and over again, like a more conventional plastic one. But basically, whenever you chop your veggies, you're just going to save the ends and the stems of essentially whatever you're chopping and then put them in this bag in the freezer until the bag gets full. And in terms of the veggies that you can pretty much use any of them. Most vegetable broths are comprised of a mix of carrots, onions, and celery. So you could definitely save the ends and peels from your carrots or the ends of your onions before you chop them off. Like I have a little frozen one here that had too much of the hard fiber on it to cut. I also have an onion top right here. You can save, let's see, I'll just dig in. The ends of celery. Right now it's kind of winter, so I have some parsnip peels in here. I got some red onion. I have some mushroom stems. Mushrooms and tomatoes are also really great to add to your vegetable broth because they'll add more umami flavor. And sometimes I throw in like tiny cloves of garlic that are so small it's like not even worth peeling and chopping them. And then I also have some fresh herbs like some cilantro stems and parsley stems. They just add more flavor as well. So when you use this method, your veggie broth is going to be a little bit different every time, but your main base is still probably going to be some onions, celery, and carrots, and also peppercorns. I have a fair amount of those right now. And there are a ton of recipes online for more gourmet broths where you're using whole food ingredients, and you can totally make that too. But for me, I don't know, it just seems kind of wasteful to put a bunch of vegetables that I'm not gonna eat in a pot and then cook it and then just discard the vegetables. I know it's not that wasteful, but you can still get really good veggie broth using scraps and you don't really have to pay anything for it. So all this was free because I already used the main parts of these vegetables in another variation of some other recipe. So we have our veggie scraps and now we're going to cook them. And the good news is you don't need any special devices to cook this. You can totally do this on your stovetop. Those instructions are on my blog. But I personally just do it in my Instant Pot because it's easier and it's more fuss-free. I use the slow cooker setting in my Instant Pot. So if you have a slow cooker, you could totally use that as well. Guys, this process is literally very easy. Oh, I don't have my pot. I just cleaned it. You take your Instant Pot and then you dump your vegetables in it. You can dump them straight from frozen. These have thawed just a little because they've been sitting out for a few minutes, but you literally just dump the entire bag in the pot. A gallon-sized bag of vegetables fits perfectly in the pot. So now we're just going to add water to this, and you're going to add water until I'd say it's about an inch below your frozen vegetables. They're going to sink down a little, and we want the vegetable broth flavor to be as concentrated as possible. I use a little bit more or less depending on the density of my vegetables, I guess. So this filled it up about 2/3 of the way. I'm just gonna get a little more water and then add that in. So I'm gonna go to about there. So in total, that was about 10 to 12 cups of water. It really is going to depend on the volume of your vegetables. So I just suggest going more by the height difference between the water and the veggie. Vegetables go in the pot, and then we're just gonna slow cook this and let heat do all of the work for us. So you can do the same thing, put your vegetables in a pot on the stove, cover it so the water line is just below the veggies, and then you're going to simmer it on low, probably for around 3 hours. If you do it on the stove, more water will probably evaporate because the seal is not as tight as a slow cooker or a pressure cooker, so you need to watch the water levels. But if you're using a slow cooker or a pressure cooker, all you have to do is cook it for 3 hours. So I'm just gonna set the slow cook timer. I'll do it for 3 hours, and then the Instant Pot will automatically start and annoyingly start to beep in a few seconds. And then you're good to go. I tested this for a very long time, and sometimes I cook my broth for like 5 or 6 hours, sometimes I cook it for 3 hours, sometimes I cook it for 4 hours. I would say I wouldn't cook it any less than 3 hours because the flavor sort of isn't as strong, and cooking it more is always better, but I don't really find there to be too much of a difference between cooking it for 3 hours or very much longer, especially if you're not sipping the broth plain and you're using it in other recipes. That is pretty much it. I'll show you how to strain it once this is done cooking. Before I leave you guys and come back 3 hours later, I do want to say I don't have this on hand all the time. You can store this in your freezer if you want to. But when I don't have veggie broth on hand that I've homemade, I like to use bouillon paste. You can find this in most grocery stores. This is their vegetable base. They also have a mushroom base, a garlic base, excuse me. And they also sell some other flavors like a vegan chicken base and a vegan beef base, which I use in a few other of my recipes on my blog, but those are harder to find in grocery stores. You usually have to buy them online. This is a concentrated vegetable paste. Then you can make your own vegetable broth using this paste by just adding it to water. This makes 38 cups of vegetable broth, whereas 1 carton of veggie broth is around $2 or $3 usually, and that holds 4 cups of vegetable broth. Even if you don't want to make your own veggie broth at home, you should just get this paste instead. And yes, it's salty, and I think that some people shy away from it because they look at the sodium content. But the thing about this paste is that you don't even have to make 1 teaspoon per cup, which is their standard measurement. If you want to make low sodium vegetable broth, you can use half a teaspoon or adjust according to taste. So, spiels aside, I'll see you guys in 3 hours. It's been 3 hours. I've taken my dogs for a walk, made myself a latte, had some food, had some more food, did some work. Basically, I just lived my life while my Instant Pot was making my veggie broth, which is pretty freaking awesome. The timer went off. I let it cool down just for a little bit, just to be easier to handle. Now I'm gonna show you how to strain it. By the way, it smells really, really good in here. But basically, we now have our veggie broth and then our veggie scraps, which we no longer need. So we're just going to strain them out. There's no like perfect way to go about it. But what I like to do is use a really large glass bowl. And then I have this fine mesh strainer. This is like the biggest round one I have. I would recommend using a fine mesh because some of the seeds from like peppers and stuff can seep through if you're using like a traditional pasta colander. So I usually just put it on here and then pour it through. But just be careful because the pot is going to be hot. If you wanted to, you could let it cool completely as well. So we're going to take this out. And also I realized that you can't really see what's in this pot because of the camera angle. So I'll insert some pictures in here of the broth before and then the broth after cooking. So also you'll get a better idea of the water level too. So then, really easy, all we do is pour it in and try not to spill or like splatter. So as you can see, a lot of the veggies kind of stay in the pot, which I am fine with. I usually just put this broth that's already strained out into jars, and then afterwards I'll just dump the veggies in here again and get the final amount of liquid out. But that's a pretty good start. There are a few things that did escape, but then you just pull it up, put that off to the side, and you got your veggie broth. How easy is that? Now, one thing to keep in mind is that this broth has no salt in it whatsoever because it's literally just vegetables and water. Well, I guess there's some natural salt from the vegetables, but traditional vegetable broth has salt in it. It's used as a preservative, and also salt adds flavor. So if you try this vegetable broth and think it tastes kind of weird, it's because you still need to add salt. So you can choose to add salt to taste here, or you can just choose to add a little bit of extra salt to whatever recipe you're making once you actually use the veggie broth. That's what I typically do. Because sometimes I just use this in the place of water, like when I'm cooking rice and it's really good, but I don't necessarily want a ton of salt in my rice. So I usually add salt as I go. You can throw these out, but if you have a compost bin, you can compost them too. So we just put them in our compost bin and they've already been cooked now for a little bit, so they'll break down even faster, which is pretty awesome. So now all we have to do is store our veggie broth. I'm actually going to use most of this for soup tonight. It's gonna be a really good soup, but I'll show you how I typically store it. I like to get wide mouth mason jars. If you have other like huge peanut butter jars or other glass jars you just have around your house, that works totally fine too. But generally it uses about 2 to 3 mason jars because it makes about 8 to 10, 12-ish cups of veggie broth. And then I just have a wide mouth funnel or a canning jar funnel. You can easily get these online or in some grocery stores. And I just scoop my broth into the jar. That was almost a disaster. And then you just continue this with the rest of your liquid. This vegetable broth will last in the fridge for up to a week. You just want to make sure you have a good seal on it. You can also freeze it. You can freeze it in ice cube molds if you're just using vegetable broth in small things, like if you're using it to saute veggies or something. Or you can also store it in glass jars, but if you put a glass jar in the freezer, just make sure to let the broth cool completely first. And also be sure to leave a little space between the liquid and the top of the jar because the liquid expands when it freezes and your jar will crack, which will not be fun to clean up in your freezer. So just keep that in mind. So I actually ended up getting 1, 2, 3 jars, pretty much, of vegetable broth from that, and each of these jars holds about 4 cups. This is honestly pretty much a non-recipe recipe. Like you can use any veggie scraps you really want. I have more instructions in my blog post and I briefly talked about it before, but I use this all the time. Personally, I think it tastes even better than store-bought broth because you're making it fresh and there isn't any weird added oils or sugars or gums or preservatives, which some store-bought veggie broths can have. And it makes your house smell really good too, and this is also perfect for like the winter season when you're already making a ton of soups, and it's essentially free. Like you're not spending any more money to make this, and you're actually kind of reducing your waste because you're cooking your vegetables down even more, and just using stuff that you would normally throw out to make something that you can use in recipes. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm really excited that I get to share this recipe with you guys. And I hope you try to make it yourself. And if you have any other tips and tricks or things you like to do with your own veggie broth, leave a comment down below. And if you'd like to see more recipe videos or like kind of food hacks or non-recipe type things like this, leave a comment too. And yeah, like, subscribe if you haven't already. Live your life, be happy, follow your destiny. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.